Hello, welcome back to the BATTASS Podcast, the Batman the Animated Series show podcast where we talk about Batman the Animated Series. My name's Clay McCormick, and with me as always is Sean Murphy. How you doing, Sean?
Man, I can't believe that they expect us to believe that Joker can take a bunch of money, hire a lawyer, and get his crazy list of crimes wiped out. That just makes no sense to me. How the hell is anybody supposed to believe this universe?
Well, you know, money goes a long way, and I think that was what you left out of your story, is the fact that he did it while he was dirt poor. So that's what was that's what was not believable about it.
Yep. Yeah. What was the phrase from Johnny Cochran? Like, if he's laughing with glee, then he must go free.
Yes,
or whatever.
Yeah, I couldn't help but notice some parallels there as well. So we might get into that a little bit as we talk about it. But the two episodes we're talking about today are Joker's Millions and Growing Pains from what is quote unquote season 4 of Batman the Animated Series, also known as The New Batman Adventures. So we're going to take a quick break, and then we'll talk about Joker's Millions. Joker's Millions, written by Paul Dini, directed by Dan Reba, and in this one, crime boss Edward King Barlow dies, and in his will leaves his arch-rival, the Joker, a large fortune of $250 million. The Joker immediately goes on a shopping spree, even searching for a replacement for Harley Quinn, but realizes too late that almost all of the money is fake as a joke of Barlow's to trick him. They're based on a comic book story of the same name. It is also references Brewster's Millions, the Richard Pryor movie. This one's, it's interesting because this is kind of like in the same vein a bit as the villains try to turn over a new Leaf story, but for the Joker, it's appropriate in that he's not really trying to do that. He's just greedy, and it's a nice Joker take on that whole trope instead of Joker trying to just go straight up legit. But did you want to talk about this one at all in reference to White Knight?
Yeah, I mean, so if I had to pick 3 episodes that probably influenced me on White Knight from this series, then this would be number 3. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's very much there. I think maybe this episode is what made me think, oh, well, what if I don't see why his crimes can't be wiped out if he's never been proven beyond a reasonable doubt to have actually ever killed anybody. Mm-hmm. Like, if you have a Joker that's running around wearing somebody's face, that's constantly, murdering people, and there's photographic evidence and whatever, then him buying his freedom doesn't make sense. But if this is an animated Joker where it's maybe he's toned down a lot, sure, he's threatened to blow up the city, but is there any proof of it? And if you have a police force that's so corrupt that they've padded the evidence against him to suspect every accusation that they've ever done, maybe with comic book logic, there is a way for Joker to get off. And I think that's what I was going for.
Yeah. It's I know we had a lot of discussions about that as you were writing it, because I felt that was a big hurdle to get around. Is you need to, if you're going to clear the Joker of his crimes, you kind of have to make it clear that this is a different kind of Joker, because once he starts literally killing people with laughing gas that turns their face into giant smiles, you kind of know who did it. But yeah, I think this one, I think in the toned down animated world, this works really well, and it starts off with a great bit where the Joker is broke, which is a ton of fun, because you've got him, he's only got a couple bullets. Actually, my favorite bit of trivia, well, there's my two favorite bits, but I'll start with the first one. I'll get to the other one later. Is hold on one second. It says Joker must be entirely destitute. Small caliber bullets, like the 22 rounds Joker's handgun uses, were pennies each at the time this episode was made, especially in the United States. Magazines, however, are much more expensive. Joker is seen ejecting one and leaving it at the scene. So clearly, because obviously the writing of this episode is that well researched that it knows the price of bullets and stuff, it shows how reckless he is that he leaves behind the more expensive magazine and can't afford to buy new bullets for his gun.
You know, it's funny, when cops who read comics or soldiers or people who know guns and have military experience, it must be clear to them that the writers have zero military experience oftentimes and are sort of going with like a Hollywood version of what guns and clips and bullets and stuff do, you know? Mm-hmm. Like, it must be hard to be a Navy SEAL and to know what trigger discipline is, to know not to put your finger on the trigger unless you're ready to shoot, to know how to enter a building, to know this, to know that, and then open a comic of, like, you know, Bruce Wayne, who's this tactical mastermind and all these people, and none of them is using, you know, trigger discipline at all. Because the writer, he watched Predator, Aliens, you know, Police Academy, and a bunch of other movies, and that's where he gets his references from, rather than actually being a military badass. Like, it must be frustrating to be a reader that knows a lot about guns, trying to read comics where the writers obviously don't.
Yeah, I mean, especially when they have guns like Cable uses, which are gigantic. I mean, how can you reconcile that in real life, right?
Well, that's the workaround, is you make it all so much fantasy that there's enough room to debate.
Yeah,
I get you.
I think there's a certain level of how much does that really matter to some extent.
Yeah.
You know, if that's what your character is based on, sure, it probably matters more than it doesn't.
Yeah.
But if I hopefully that doesn't make or break the comic experience. Although I have to say,
yeah,
they in movies they put so much work now into getting that stuff looking right that when I go back and I watch Predator now, the thing that stands out to me about Predator is nobody holds a gun correctly in that whole movie. They all hold the guns with the stock under their arm just to emphasize their bicep.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's fine. Because like there's a shot where I can't remember where, I just talked about this recently. There's a shot where he walks into frame and it's just like waist level, so you can see Arnold's huge bicep on the gun as he walks. It's done on purpose to emphasize the size of his arm and stuff. But I think we may have talked about this on the very last episode of this show. I don't remember, but if we did,
well, to expand, we can expand on it because I've had more thoughts about this. You're right. When movies, like, think about Casablanca and Dick Tracy. When characters step into frame, they're like, this is a gun. Now put all the money in the corner, and they're holding the gun by their hip, and it's a pistol, which is even harder to aim. Plus, it's a .45, which is a notoriously it doesn't aim very well. Mm-hmm. So back in the 30s, that didn't really bother anybody. But as time moved on, we're like, all right, maybe they should hold the guns in front of their faces so they're actually using the sights. And then, you have another wave of the next generation's like, what if we have tons of machine guns? What if Arnold just holds it like this? Like, that'll be cool. And for a while, that was fine. But now we know the general audience knows more about guns now, where you keep adding new things of the list, the things that you should know about guns if you're going to be in entertainment. Like, I think it's fair at this point to say, don't have characters hold pistols by their hips. Don't have characters hold it like Arnold did in Predator. Don't have characters with fingers on their triggers, even though they have no intention of actually firing the weapon. Like, I actually agree with readers who get nitpicky about that stuff. Like, in each generation of entertainment sort of tightens up the rules about, what's real with guns, because there's so many documentaries and YouTube channels about, like, the flaws in movies, and, like, you can't actually throw a match into a pool of gasoline and have it explode. What will really happen is the candle will go out, because you need, like, atomized gas. You need it to be vapor for it to actually work. And more people are aware of this now, so I think that it is fair to say creators should be more aware of, like, the realism of these things. But I once got in trouble because I drew a guy with a sniper rifle, and the reference I used, I apparently gave him a left-handed sniper rifle, and he was firing it with the right hand, so the shells would actually eject into his face. And someone called me out on it, and that's one where I'm like, go fuck yourself. Like, come on. I drew trigger discipline. I don't have him shooting from the hip. Like, I did 9 out of 10 things right. You think you could just let me go on this one?
Yeah, I don't think 9 of those 10 things really matter, honestly. I mean, it's fine if that's what you want to spend your calories on. That's fine, but like,
yeah,
would I rather somebody drop a match into a pool of gasoline than have them do it correctly? Yeah, because it looks better. It's,
right.
I would, as long as it's semi believable, I think it's fine. And I think there's a certain level of accuracy that the suspension of disbelief comes into play for the sake of an arresting, interesting image.
Do you agree that people used to give a lot more leeway, and that readers now are tightening up a lot on what looks right and what doesn't? You know what I mean?
Some, I guess. I mean, I guess it matters. It depends if that kind of thing matters. Everybody who was watching Casablanca and all of those Humphrey Bogart movies had just gotten back from World War II, so they all knew how guns worked.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't really. I think, like I said, I think there's a level of. I think it comes down to the piece itself.
Yeah.
If it shatters believability, then no, don't do it. But I don't know. I think it depends on a piece by piece basis. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Like I'm happy to tighten it up if it's reasonable. Like I think trigger discipline is pretty reasonable to put into comics these days. Like I can easily have people holding guns without their fingers being behind the trigger. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And if it gets those, 10 Navy SEALs who read Batman off my ass, fine, I'll do that. But I'm sure they're probably going to be okay with a matchstick in a pool of gas blowing up.
Sure.
That's just fun,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, when I was working on Bloody Hell, one of the things I had to kind of figure out early on, because I had so much, so much reference and stuff in my head and in front of me, and I'm like, how much of this stuff, how minute detail am I going to get into here? And then I very quickly was like, well, I'm going to get into as much detail as I feel like the story needs. I don't think I need to get down to making sure that every soldier in the background has the right patch on their arm or whatever. I think there's a level of impressionism that you can use with that stuff, where it's like, as long as the close-up stuff is right, then you can kind of fudge some of the other stuff.
Yeah. Yep, I get you.
But yeah, we've got Joker running out of money and being gifted $250 million by his arch rival here. Harley's not so lucky. Harley goes back to Arkham, and part of Joker's spending spree is hiring a new Harley, which is a fun sequence. I was kind of...
That actress, do you know who that is? That actress?
No, who is it?
Do you remember the show Friends? Chandler's annoying ex-girlfriend, I forget her name, but she always used to be like, hey, Chandler Bing.
Oh, really? Oh, I never watched Friends, but I'm sure there's plenty of people who recognize that. Yeah, she's great. I love that he calls her fake Harley every time. I like
how he's going to shoot her in the back of the head the minute he gets bored with her.
This would have been a great episode for him to swing by the brand manager and settle up his debts. But unfortunately, that character didn't exist then.
So I didn't know this, but because I just looked up King Barlow because I wanted to know if this guy has a history. And this is actually a one-shot comic from 1952, written by David Verne, penciled by Dick Sprang and Charles Paris. And it actually covers up like a plot hole that I found. So when watching this, I really like this episode. But I feel like if Joker gets all this money, like $250 million or whatever, and only $10 million is real, then the IRS coming to him saying you owe us this money is bullshit. The IRS can only claim like $5 million because all Joker has to say is, oh, I didn't actually get 250, I only got 10. And that's just sorted out, which they don't really talk about. But in the comic, they actually point out that Joker doesn't want to admit that he was fooled, and it's his own ego that stops him from actually sorting it out with the IRS, forcing him to like create more crime, which makes perfect sense for Joker.
They say that in the episode too.
Oh, do they?
Yeah, they also they actually cover it up even more in the episode, because in the video that he watches, Barlow says, "I only gave you $10 million, which I'm sure you blew through already." So the fact is that he has no money that he could pay taxes on.
I didn't catch the line where he says he doesn't want to admit to everybody the laughing stock.
It's in the video where he says, I only gave you $10 million, which I'm sure you blew through already.
Yeah.
And you could never admit that I got one over on you because you'd be the laughing stock of the crime, whatever.
You know what? You're right. Okay. I retract everything I said. Sorry, David.
Well, what's
Dick Sprang.
The other piece of trivia that I liked, which I actually don't know if this is true because I'm not a tax attorney, but it says, in U.S. tax law, inheritances are not taxable to the recipient. What is taxable is the distribution to the estate. So the IRS should have been talking to the executor, not Joker.
Yeah. I know another workaround I thought was if Joker agrees to take this inheritance, there could be strings attached where he also inherits the debt. So he might not. If you wanted to make this more realistic, and this is a kid's show, by the way, so
this is
don't
like
do
this
this
is
idea.
like the trigger discipline of Joker's Millions is working this out.
This is the trigger discipline of the IRS guy who's about to he's losing his mind because no one in Gotham seems to understand how taxes work. Like, damn it, honey, I get home and all I want to do is watch Batman and relax. I don't want to think about working at H&R Block and how I wasted my life. The least they could do is understand a little bit about tax law.
Yeah.
She tries to take away his dinner. He's like, I'm not done with that.
Worth the time and the effort. Yeah, but I really enjoy this one. This is I think, again, I hate to keep harping on this, but Paul Dini writes the best Joker. All of his Joker episodes are really good. You even get some nice Harley and Ivy stuff in here a little bit. This is one of those episodes where it kind of surprises me that we have so many episodes where we're like, man, that was nothing really happened. That story was so simple, because they've got so many moving parts in this one. Because you've got the Joker with the money, you've got the Harley thing going on, you've got Batman trying to figure out what's going. There's like 3 different things all going at the same time. So it's not that these episodes can't get complicated. I don't want to say dense because it's not really dense, but it's more than just point A to point B, you know?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Do you do you feel like we were sort of criticizing season 3 as feeling very light and streamlined, and it doesn't have the depth of the first 2 seasons or 3 seasons. And I think this one, it's an amazing episode, but it still has that problem where it's by design not going to be Heart of Ice, obviously.
Right.
But it still is missing. It's doing what all the other episodes from this season are doing, where it's taking a lot of ideas and stripping them down so that it's just like beat after beat after beat. Things move forward. It never lets up. It never slows down to let you breathe and consider anything. And again, this wouldn't be the episode to do it, but this still feels like a season 4 episode.
Yeah, it does.
And it wouldn't exist in season 1 through 3. I know I keep changing the seasons around, but hopefully people know what I mean.
Yeah, it's funny because it reminds me a little bit of the Holiday Nights episode, in that there's like a montage of like silly costumes and doing funny things in the middle of it, which I actually, to jump to the things that I would like to draw, I think I would like to draw Joker in his golfing attire. Cause
I had a feeling when it goes through Joker using his money and painting his mansion purple, I'm like, this is what Clay's going to pick.
Yeah,
although he wouldn't want to draw a mansion.
Yeah, well, I can trace a mansion like in nobody's business. Yeah, that stuff was really fun. I think that would be a lot of fun to draw, and Joker being goofy in a golf suit, I think would be fun. But it's still the same kind of energy as that other thing where it's like, let's kill a couple minutes by doing a montage of silliness. Like this whole episode is it's pretty silly. It's pretty goofy. You've got Harley getting caught in the spin cycle of a washing machine.
Yeah, that wasn't in the comic.
The Joker interviewing all of these other Harleys. I mean, that stuff is fun, but that stuff is good. But it's like there's still like a goofiness level to it. I don't think they leaned into as much in the previous seasons.
Yeah, it's fine. I mean, if that was the order from on high, if they wanted it to be like, hey guys, as much as we appreciate an episode about this flashback between a priest and a gangster in this, once upon a time in Brooklyn or whatever, like, this is a kid's show, so you mind lightening it up a bit? Thanks. Then they certainly did it,
Yeah, and I'm starting to notice they really are kind of dialing back on Batman this season. Because Robin, Nightwing, and Batgirl are definitely getting more screen time, and Batman's he's not getting pushed to the side, but sometimes he kind of is. He's Bruce Wayne is in this one for a little bit. Batman's really only there at the beginning and the end. In the next one, Batman's barely in it. It feels like maybe they are trying to skew a little younger, because obviously the Batman and Robin had just come out, so they're trying to bring Batgirl into the proceedings and angle into that stuff. So yeah, maybe that's just the mandate, is that it's supposed to be a little bit more kid focused.
Yeah. I mean, I think it does a good job at handling a lot of complex ideas. Like Joker's one-liner, like, I'm crazy enough to tangle with Batman, but the IRS, no, thank you. That must be one of the best Joker lines in the entire series, honestly.
Yeah. I
wonder if that's in the comic, actually.
The one thing I will credit all of popular culture as the one positive thing that I think they've given to the world is everybody, I think, has a healthy fear of the IRS, thanks to cartoons and movies and stuff, because that's always the joke, right? It's always like, oh geez, the IRS are going to kill you, blah 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 blah. And that's why to this day I'm terrified of being audited or something. Like, if you get a thing in the mail that says from the Office of the Treasury, I'd have to take a second and breathe in before I open it.
Yeah. I knew a famous Batman artist who's very wealthy. He's a friend of mine, and he got audited like 4 years ago, and it was just like this year-long process, pain in the ass, and had to hire people. And when you're that wealthy, your money is harder to keep track of, because you have people that like invest for you, and you have it spread out, and your accountants do things with your taxes that you're not really aware of, nor could you explain. That's the problem with the tax code, is it's just so complicated. There's all these loopholes if you pay the right person. So he didn't do anything wrong, but he just still had to justify it. And the stress of possibly losing money, and even if they find you guilty, you can negotiate on how you want to pay them back and when you want to pay them back. And yeah, he's like a guy that's not easily stressed out, but he was very stressed out for a year. And finally, when it was over, he just got drunk as fuck at a convention, and I can't blame him.
Yeah, my sister got into, it wasn't trouble. Like, she didn't do anything wrong, but it was like, she got a notice saying that she owed money, but she had already paid the money, but like it didn't register, so she kept getting the notice. It was one of those things where it was like there's some sort of clerical error where she kept getting a notice and was getting like heat from the IRS for not paying this thing that she had paid off like 6 months ago. And it's one of those things where it's like, because they're that's not going to go away until they find the error. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So I don't have tax problems, but when I was living in California, I moved, and the state assumed that I still made money in California the year after. So they sent me a letter, and it took a while to get forwarded to my new address, which was in New England. Mm-hmm. And, it said that I owed like $6,000. And I showed it to my dad. I was young enough to still be like, Dad, what do I do? And he's like, well, you didn't do anything wrong. Like, I would just throw the letter out. So I'm like, okay. And that's sort of the way I was raised. Like, he was sort of very libertarian minded that way. Mm-hmm. Like, to this day, I don't get my cars inspected. I just get them registered. And if I get pulled over, cops rarely notice anyway. Like, I'll follow the rules that I have to follow, but I'm happy to ignore a lot of the shit that just seems like an annoyance. And it's just how I was raised.
Hold on. You don't get your cars inspected?
No, I have them registered, but I don't get them inspected.
Okay.
And I know you're supposed to, and you're supposed to have the sticker, but I've moved around to so many different states, and I buy cars in other states. So it's always like a mishmash of like, when am I supposed to get this inspected? Do I get a year pass? I bought a car in Pennsylvania and I transferred it to, like, I paid the registration fee, so I'm not a total criminal. Mm-hmm. So when I get pulled over by cops, usually they're just going to say, just get it taken care of. and I don't get pulled over that much anymore. So I never bother getting stuff registered.
Man,
I'm sorry, getting it inspected.
The cops in Maine that listen to this show.
I know. Well, half the vehicles I own are antique, and you legally don't have to get them inspected.
Oh, okay.
If your brakes give out on your classic Datsun, well, that's on you. That's on you, buddy.
Sure.
And the guy in front of you, but whatever. Anyway, so that mentality, keep that in mind. So I show my father this letter from California, and I would just throw it out. So I just chuck it, and I keep chucking these letters for years. And eventually they just go away. So I'm like, all right, problem solved. I just hope I don't get arrested in California, because maybe that would be bad. So every time I went to San Diego, I was always careful to not stand out or whatever. So finally we're trying to register to get a loan for a house. And I have a lien on me that I didn't know about it. This lien was, 6 years old, and we couldn't get the money we needed for this house because idiot here followed his father's advice, and he didn't decide to sort it out. And of course, there's extra fees tacked on now from the beautiful state of California. So I had a lot more money to my name at this point. So I had an attorney, a tax guy rather, and he was able to just take it and deal with it for me. But it still definitely dinged my credit. And sorry to get boring, but being a freelancer, a lot of people know, it's just the system to get loans and the way that banks work are not designed to help us at all.
Right.
They don't like the fact that you make no money one year and a lot of money next year. They like consistency, and freelancing is not about consistency. They hate 1099s, and when you're a freelancer, you're all about 1099s. They prefer W-2s and W-9s or whatever, the regular ways of the salary people, make money. Mm-hmm. And they like to see, if you're going to get a loan, they don't want to see a bunch of money get injected into your account last year. They want to see that for the last 5 years, you've had a consistent, healthy amount in your bank before they give you a loan.
Sure.
So, going to the local bank and shaking hands with the farmer next to you is like, hey, me, I'm good for it, blah, blah, blah. Those days are fucking over, Mm-hmm. So yeah, for me, ironically, I had all this Batman money. I do a ton of cash at conventions. I could buy the person who's denying me a loan. I could buy them and all of their friends. I could hire assassins to wipe these people out, no problem. But
Sean, I'm glad you're staying humble in your success.
Sorry. I was getting really furious at these people. I wasn't complaining the don't you know who I am thing, but it's how is it that I have cash in hand enough to buy a giant house in Portland, and yet they're still not able to loan me a measly $200,000 for the last 10%. Mm-hmm. Who the hell shows up and is able to buy a house 80% of the way or whatever? I had a ton of money to put down. And it didn't fucking matter. The truth is, if I had a part-time job at Starbucks making $18 a year, they would have been more likely to give me money.
Right. Well, what's going to happen is you're going to get in their face, and they're going to be like, "Oh, really? Well, how come at the end of Curse of White Knight you didn't understand that Bruce Wayne can't just give all his money away because Wayne Enterprises has people on the board. He has people to answer to. He can't just say it's all over and just liquidate it. They would get him off the. Do you even research anything you do? The guns look great though."
Yeah, at least you know about trigger discipline.
Yeah.
No, honestly, with how far behind the IRS is, if you were me or anybody listening who's a freelancer gets audited, they're going to be like, "So what kind of artist are you?" You're going to go freelancer, and they're going to say, "What do you mean freelance?" And you go, "Well, I'm an idiot who tries to make money in comics." And they're going to go like Spider-Man and Batman and stuff, like movies, and you're like, "Yeah, but there's not a lot of money in it like you would think. I'm actually pretty poor."
Yeah.
And then they're going to go through your write-offs and try to understand your weird-ass career, and they're just going to be rolling their eyes like, why can't this motherfucker just get a real job at Starbucks?
Yeah.
I mean, if they even went to if I sat down with these people and they're like, all right, we've researched your case. We know all about you, Mr. Murphy. We've read all of your scripts. We have all of your pitches. We know about your endings. We know about the YouTube videos that have broken your Batman apart. And if they showed up that prepared, I would be stunned to know that the IRS is actually doing that kind of legwork and that's what my tax dollars are paying for.
Well, just for the record, I think the IRS does a great job, just in case they happen to be listening to this.
In case they're listening. Yeah. Sorry, no, I'm not trying to be arrogant by saying I could buy you, but I was in a really bad mood that day.
Oh, boy.
Yeah.
I think I found a
anyway,
I found a pull quote for this episode. Last thing to talk about in this one is just briefly, it's the first appearance of the new redesign of the Penguin, which is a much more classic sort of Burgess Meredith looking Penguin. Yeah. Less interesting to me than the Danny DeVito one.
Yeah.
But I guess I guess this season his deal is mostly that he just owns the Iceburg Lounge.
Yep.
And so I guess they wanted a design that looked a little bit more formal and not like a giant, mutated.
Yeah, he's the legit businessman now. That's kind of how they went with him.
Yeah.
In fact, that would be the thing that I would want to draw is I would try to keep him in that character, but I would put the long hair back. Like I kind of miss the old Danny DeVito style,
Yeah. Yeah, it's a cool look. It's an interesting take on him, and I guess at this point it's out of style because it's 6 years after that movie came out, I think.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just a little more traditional Penguin, which I'm not a huge fan of, but I don't think the design itself looks bad. I think it's fine.
I bet that I think when they first did the Danny DeVito one for season 1, they sort of didn't want to because it was a brand new idea. Like imagine you and I writing Batman and they gave us a brand new idea for a character that we loved that was totally foreign to us. And for you and me, Danny DeVito is where it all goes back to. Right. We're younger.
Right.
But for them, they grew up with the Burgess Meredith, so I bet they were happy to return to form.
That's true. That's a good point. I hadn't really thought about it that way, yeah. But yeah, he's I have no problems with him in general. I don't think he shows up a ton of times, so he's not really that prominent. But I do like the new role if he's more of a background character who owns that lounge. I think that's fun. It's interesting. It's interesting how you've got on one hand you've got the Oswald Cobblepot of Batman Returns, who is this comparable. He's sort of like the mirror image of Bruce Wayne, where he's born to rich family, but he was born as a quote unquote freak. So they threw him in the water, and he never got the money that he was owed. But he's like this also secret millionaire kind of thing. Versus this one where
there was a nice juxtaposition in Batman Returns.
Yeah, versus this one where he's just like a kind of sleazy businessman. I think the first one works really well for the purposes of Batman Returns, but I think he's probably better suited in this kind of characterization. Yeah.
Yeah, I've always liked the Penguin as like a B villain. I don't see myself ever writing a story where he is the main threat. And I do like that they made him a tragic, sort of empathetic character for the first part of that movie. And he's a version of Bruce Wayne that constantly has fish guts and motor oil leaking out of his face. But I don't know what it was that made me not love that movie when it comes to the Penguin. Maybe it just got too silly. Maybe they just let Tim Burton off his leash and he's like, awesome, so it's gonna be like Beetlejuice but with Batman in it sometimes.
Hey, this sounds good to me. And you said you would draw the Iceburg Lounge?
Yeah, I like that setting a lot. I think it's a cool like blue looking Art Deco type of place with the seals and stuff in the water. I just always thought that was neat.
Yeah, that would be a tough one for me because the thing I can never crack is I'm just not a clean artist. Like even when I try my best to have like nice clean lines, they're always fucked up somehow. And so something like that, like the Iceburg Lounge, which is like everything is ice and perfect and the lines need to be pristine, I would just be like, ugh. What if the lights are out or something?
Yeah, the cleanliness. So I have excuse me, sorry, I just hit my microphone. My art, the cleanliness depends on the story. Like it's not something conscious I do, but with plot holes, it's a lot more cartoony. So you get a lot of more animated faces and stuff. With Batman, there's just a ton of shadows. So I just end up, without even thinking about it, making things more mature, I don't know if your style can become like a chameleon depending on the script you have. Or if, when you do it, is it conscious or not?
Yeah, I don't know. I everything I've done so far has had a level of grit built into it, so I haven't done anything that really requires a clean style. There's something I'm kind of working on now that I might try to go a little cleaner with it just to see if I can. But we'll see. We'll see what happens.
Yeah.
I would draw Golf Joker. That's another thing. Maybe I'll just draw that on the side for the hell of it. That would be fun to draw.
Golf Joker in a golf cart is pretty great.
Yes.
And of course he interrupts Bruce Wayne on a date.
Right. Yeah. See, that's one of the things too, where it's like I feel like a more considered montage like that would have Bruce Wayne tracking him or something as he instead of the Joker just passing through frame while Bruce is on a date.
Yeah, this version of Bruce where he's Batman all the time, I don't see him dating.
No,
I think the old one does with a double-breasted brown jacket.
Yes, definitely that one. What would you rate this one?
I'm gonna go 4 out of 5.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna go 4 as well. Not only because of its accurate depiction of technology at the high-tech software expo at the beginning of the episode.
The HD TV stand.
Yes, yeah.
You're big on DVDs, and I love how Batman punches him through the center of a CD.
Yes. Great use of a CD.
Yeah, it was very much oversized prop, Adam West style,
But still being reasonable.
Yeah.
I'm going to give it a 4. I like this one. I think it's a good Joker episode. I think the goofiness of it works. I think it's pretty funny, actually. I would say I think the new version of the Joker works pretty well in this episode. I'm not really sure why. I don't know if it wouldn't work with the old one or what, but that design seemed to fit the story that they were doing here.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I think that's going to do it for Joker's Millions. Let's take a quick break, and we'll be back with Growing Pains. Okay, Growing Pains, story by Paul Dini and Robert Goodman, teleplay by Robert Goodman, directed by, Atsuko Tanaka. Let's call that right.
Sure.
In this one, Robin fights to protect a young girl with amnesia named Annie, who is being stalked by her father, quote unquote, who turns out to be Clayface. Having created the girl from his own body to scout out the city, he now intends to reabsorb her. I could not remember the last time I had watched this. It didn't seem super familiar to me, so I didn't have a working knowledge of the episode. And about halfway through, I was watching it with my girlfriend. About halfway through, I went, I think I know where this is going. And the reason that I figured it out was because the father, when he was talking, I was in my head, I went, that sounds a lot like Ron Perlman. So immediately I was like, that's I know what's going on.
I did a commission of this piece a couple years ago, I guess. And it was Batman on my motorcycle, slamming into Clayface and skidding into him, but pushing his body over the edge of a building while the rest of his body is
oh, cool,
stretched out 20 feet. And way in the background is Annie, the girl, and I think the guy who wanted the commission asked for her specifically. So I did get to revisit this episode kind of recently, and if you look up that commission, I'm pretty proud of it. It still holds up. A lot of my stuff I don't like to look at anymore, but that one for sure.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I don't think I've ever seen that. I'd like to see that one.
Yeah, and when I was doing that commission, I realized that Annie is definitely based off of the girl from The Professional.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Yeah, definitely same kind of look.
90s choker, the bob, the sort of a look. I forget, what's the actress's name? Queen Amidala.
Natalie Portman.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. The thing about this episode is I feel like it is the first one that breaks that trend that we've been talking about with this season where they're all just kind of light, because this is a season 1, 2, 3 episode. Absolutely.
The beat at the end too. I think for a lot of fans, this is a top 5 episode with the girl, with Robin's coming of age type thing.
Yeah, I would not disagree with that. I was very surprised how good this was. on a number of levels. They keep pulling out the stops with the animation for the Clayface episodes. Atsuko Tanaka has worked a lot with the studio. How do you pronounce it? Is it Ghibli?
Ghibli or Ghibli? Yeah, I don't know.
She's worked on Lupin the Third, Little Nemo, Adventures in Slumberland, Animaniacs, Princess Mononoke, Spirited Away, Sonic X, Howl's Moving Castle, and Ponyo. So she's been involved with a lot of those big ones. And
this animation in this is some of the best of the entire series.
Oh, it's fantastic.
The beginning, the motorcycle stuff, all the ellipses and the wheels are correct. The bikes are all unique and they move well, and it's hand drawn. Like it's crazy how, and the effects with the bricks when the Clayface is like turns his that stuff is, and even the way when Robin screams at him at the end after he realizes that Annie's dead. Basically, they do some like jagged anime, like manga style lines on his face, and they break model a little bit, but I think it works. Yeah,
and it's one of those things where I always end up picking up in the episodes where they really dial it up animation quality wise. I always end up picking it up in like the in between type movements that you can tell they really put some elbow into, some back into elbow grease, whatever.
Elbow grease. Yeah. Put your back into it.
Put some back grease into it. Like in that first sequence with the motorcycle guys, there's a moment where Robin picks up a 2x4 and throws the 2x4, and they animated like every moment of that where his arm just like bends back in this really dynamic way, and you see like the whole movement of his body as he throws it. Yeah, like I was like, oh, okay, this is one of those ones where they're really gonna go for it. Yeah. There's one where Clayface, as the dad, throws Robin, and Robin does like a tucking somersault, and it's done from a 3/4 angle with the camera slightly above. And I paused it, and I went back. I wish that I could get my HBO Max to do slow motion, because I wanted to know, like, how did they film somebody and get it on model that way? I mean, it just looks so good, and it's so fast that you don't even really appreciate it, Yeah, there's lots of that stuff. It's always in the stuff like that where they really take their time. Like in the Sub-Zero movie, we were both like, did you see that shot of Batman and Robin running towards the camera for half a second? It looked amazing. The Dutch angle with the ice in the back. You know what? That's actually a lot like the shot here where Robin and Annie are running towards us in a tunnel, and you see Clayface's clay and bricks smash into the wall. Right. It's basically the reverse shot. Yeah. And it's... The Clayface stuff looks fantastic. All that brick stuff is amazing. All of the attacking that he does is really great. And on top of that, the story is just really good. It's not a lot of story, but it's an affecting story, if that makes sense. Because you have Robin. Your focus is on Robin, and you spend enough time with him and the girl to get a bit of a feeling of some sort of connection or relationship, and then they just like pull the rug out from under you about 3/4 of the way through in fantastic fashion. I like how Robin's in the back seat of the limo and Alfred's driving, and Alfred's basically like, you can't leave the car, don't go anywhere, and Robin's like, fuck you, when he leaves. And I'm like, man, I'm surprised I don't have some kind of Alfred doesn't have like a taser or some kind of a kid leash thing that just makes Robin do what he wants when Bruce isn't around. It's kind of a liability. Or the doors are locked. Maybe a taser's overkill. Sorry. Yeah, because having a ward in your house like that is just an asset that needs to be controlled at all times. Well, yeah, and he's got all of Bruce's cars seem to be outfitted with quick change sections to turn into to put your bat suit on as quickly as possible if you need to jump out. Yeah. Of course my brain goes to, why doesn't he just taser Robin? I'm the guy that went to the IRS and told them that I could hire assassins. Yes, yeah. All right. Maybe don't bring me, if you need Mr. Level-Headed, maybe don't bring Sean along. Yeah, I look forward to all of these being used in court someday. Yeah. But I just wanted to know who draws that part of the hentai. That's all I wanted to know. I didn't do anything illegal here. Man, I listened to that hentai one a lot, and I go back and I'm like, man, there's like 3 extra points that I wanted to make that I totally forgot. And I can't remember it right now. Plus, it's not the place for it, obviously. Well, that's too bad, because this is the animation one where they really leaned into it. But yeah, it's good. I think the The payoff at the end works really well. It's funny how after he reabsorbs the girl, I was at that point he accidentally slices open the solvent tank and starts getting dissolved and stuff. And I felt more worried or like involved or affected by him getting eaten away by the solvent after he had reabsorbed the girl, because you're now worried, the girl is a character you're attached to. She's now sucked back into Clayface. So now anything that happens to him is by proxy happening to her. So it adds a little bit of tension to that stuff that I thought worked really well.
Yeah, I was moved by her being reabsorbed is heartbreaking, of course, but I was more moved by Robin losing his shit and deciding to like possibly kill Clayface.
Sure, yeah.
And the Batman has to step in. Like, you see what pushes Robin over the edge. Like, he goes through the entire rainbow of emotions in this episode. He's like love struck when they're talking to Gordon. He's, confused. He's hurt. He's sad. He's happy. Whatever. They're holding hands at one point, and then he's just pure anger. This poor kid, who generally deals with emotion pretty well. Like, the way that Tim is written in this series, he's sort of like the level-headed Robin. I've always felt like the kid's pretty bulletproof. Like, I don't think he needs a therapist. I think he's generally got himself under control. Whereas Dick needs a therapist.
Yes. Yeah, in this one,
maybe Batman hadn't tased him so much when he was a kid.
Yeah. Well, he's learned now, so he lets Tim free roam a little bit. Like even in that little scene where he's like, "Yeah, my dad wasn't that great either." It's like, oh, he's actually kind of dealing with that stuff pretty well. He's a fairly he's got a good head on his shoulders.
Yeah. So to skip to the end, and there's a reason why I'm bringing this up. I do give this a 4. I don't give it a 5, and I don't know why. I'm trying to think of what I would do to improve this, because I feel like in theory this could have Heart of Ice level emotions going on. And I know that for a lot of people this is one of their favorites. I think this might be a little bit overrated as far as an episode, but I still think it's like a high 4. But I'm trying to think, like, if she was actually real, maybe that would be all the difference. But then, of course, the plot doesn't make sense. I'm trying to think what it is that's missing for me that's keeping it from being a 5.
Well, is she not real though? I mean, she says she's not real, but she's real enough to Robin, right?
Yeah, I get that.
You just want it to be like an Inner Light situation where you see them spend their entire life together and grow old and get married, and then she finds out she's Clayface and gets absorbed back into Clayface.
That's brutal. Or they have a kid, but it's just like a mushy ball of clay, and they're like, "What's going on?" And then the clay turns into a baby.
Funny you should mention that, because I have never read this story, but I saw it come up somewhere recently. I think around the time WandaVision was out, because of all the stuff with her kids and stuff. This came up. There's an X Factor story where Multiple Man...
Didn't think that would be coming up during a Batman podcast.
Where Multiple Man and I believe Siren, who is Banshee's daughter, they either get married, she gets pregnant and they have a kid.
Yeah.
And after she gives birth to the kid, she gives the baby to Multiple Man to hold, and Multiple Man immediately absorbs the baby back into himself, because she had fallen in love, she didn't know this, and neither did he, with one of Multiple Man's clones.
Oh.
So as soon as she gives birth to this newborn baby, hands it to Multiple Man, and that absorbs back into him, which then he eventually absorbs back into the original Multiple Man. But man, like that is a fucking gut punch. That's an amazing story.
Yeah. I'm watching Invincible now, and there's that girl that can keep multiplying herself. And as she's getting blasted in the face, she'll divide from herself like osmosis. So a version of herself gets killed over and over and over while the essence of her keeps moving on. But then there's a question of, well, that version of you that was getting killed was still a human being who was probably terrified. Like, what? And for that matter, do you even get to charge the assailant with a murder? Like, I'm just curious, like, I know, not to get into legal stuff in IRS all over again. Do they have to pay taxes? No, I'm kidding.
If you were to hires someone to kill an IRS agent who happened to be able to multiply themselves. Would that count as murder?
If the clone did the murder and then uncloned, and you could prove that the clone was acting in and of himself, that the clone is now essentially dead, I think Joker's lawyer will be able to get him off. Yeah. Yeah, like, if the clone did flee, then he can go free, or you need a jingle for it, basically.
If the killer was a clone, the defendant must go home.
This is why you're the real writer. Oh man, that's good.
Yeah, but that stuff that stuff always works when you can lean into really getting the hooks into someone emotionally and then just rip away the reality of it. That stuff always works.
Yeah. So, did you know this episode was highly rated?
I didn't. No, I didn't remember it, or I didn't remember the name. I never really heard it mentioned. I feel like I usually hear Heart of Ice and the flashback mobster episode talked about a lot, but this one I don't really hear talked about that often. In my weekly meeting of Batman the Animated Series fans that I go to.
How many comments do you get on each episode? Do you get a lot of these things, or because when you reach out to me, sometimes a fan will have a question, or whatever. Do you get a lot of like feedback for these episodes?
On YouTube, on the YouTube posts a couple, handful, not too many. But I do get questions from our Penske File patrons through our Discord that we're on. We have a BATTASS thing over, like a channel over there that people can talk to me and all that kind of stuff. So
I find that,
and Twitter as well. I get people on Twitter from time to time.
That's true. Yeah. Being off Twitter and all, you handle the correspondence, so I don't really get it from you. But the two that have leaked through to me were both sex-based. It was like, who is the Sean banged a stripper who used to date a Batman actor. Who was the Batman actor is the number one thing I get. Number two is that sci-fi actress in a bar who got finger blasted. What's her name? And I don't blame people for asking that, obviously. I don't expect people to be like, can you give me some help with my 1099?
Well, I mean, if you could tell that story and teach a lesson about personal finance at the end of it, then maybe that would be more helpful.
Oh man, I'm trying to think of a way to use like the phrase trigger discipline with finger blasting somebody, but I can't seem to. Yeah.
Oh boy.
Luckily, I can't do it.
Anyway,
moving on.
Yeah. I don't know how much there is to say about this episode. I think it's really good. It's I think it shows that there's not this season doesn't have to be as I don't want to use the word empty, but it doesn't have to be as light as it has been up to this point. I'll be surprised if there are more that kind of hit this height. Yeah, because I don't really. This is probably the season I'm least familiar with, so I don't really even know what's coming. Actually, so
yeah. If I could draw one thing, I think I would change the backgrounds in some of the scenes. There's at least, it feels like 2 or 3 fight scenes that take place in an abandoned industrial, like a building that's being built. It's like a construction site or whatever. And I get using it once, but I feel like the boring grid of a building in the background is used in a lot of shots in this. And I just kind of wish that they had taken one of the fights to a more interesting location.
It's funny. I feel like one of the hallmarks of a television show that's trying to save money is how many fights or action sequences take place in factories or construction sites. Highlander, I'm looking at you. So it's funny that they do that in this when it's like, well, it's not like it costs more to use a different location because you're drawing it. It's going to cost the same amount. But I did notice there's a lot of kind of weird open spaces. If I was to draw something, I would draw Robin, but give him like a sick BMX bike, because he does a lot of open space running in this episode, and all I could think of was he needs a bike or something. He's not swinging from the rooftops because he's chasing this girl, and it's a lot of these big open spaces, and it's just a lot of him like running a long distance, even towards the end where there's a point where he and Batman like run off frame, and that's like a big open expanse that they're running through. And I was like, rollerblades or something, or a bike would go
Razor
a long
scooter,
way. Yeah, there you go.
Something like that.
There's got to be. Is there not a modern version of Robin in a cartoon or something that uses a razor scooter? That seems to make too much sense.
Yeah. I put a hoverboard thing for Joker and White Knight, which did the trick. Actually, there's a statue that a company is going to make. I can't say who. And they're asking for extra props to put in the background of the plinth that he's sitting on. So they're like, can you put like a trench coat over the bag of money or whatever? And I was like, well, there's really no trench coat for Joker in my book, but he did have a hoverboard. So I drew that leaning on a bag of money. So he just robbed a bank with his hoverboard and is now sitting near a gargoyle or whatever. It's that kind of statue.
Oh,
so
nice.
It's going to be awesome, but I'm glad that they went for the hoverboard. I don't want to call that a hoverboard because it doesn't look like Marty McFly's.
No, it's it looks like the one he steals though, doesn't it? It's the before he snaps the handlebars off of it.
The wooden plank from the 50s?
No, in Back to the Future 2, when he gets the hoverboard, he takes it from a girl and it has the upright T-bar scooter handle on it.
Yeah. I remember the ones in the 80s were a lot better because the tires were bigger and they were gummier, so they offered a bit more spring. And I think when the Razor scooters came out, I go, that's a dumb idea because the metal and the hard wheels are really unforgiving. Like, there's no way this is going to take off.
Yeah, I remember when I was a kid, my cousin had a scooter that was like, it was a solid machine. It was like a bike. You know, it had like big... It had solid tires on it.
They don't build them that way anymore.
Yeah, it had solid tires on it, and it had a braking system, like a bike brake system built into it. And I was like, this is so cool. It's a pain in the ass to ride because, you know, who wants to ride with pushing with their feet? But
well, the fact that they're collapsible and fit into a backpack is part of the charm, I guess.
And I always assumed that the wheels were similar to like rollerblade wheels or skateboards or something, so they move pretty slickly. Yeah.
Did you have a big wheel growing up?
Old man corner over here. Yes, I did. I had a big wheel. You know what else I had, which I loved? Did you have one of those things? I don't even know what the hell it's called, but it's like it's a seat, and then
I was going to bring this up.
Yeah, it's like kind of flat, and it's got the handlebars in the front, and you put your feet on the handlebars, and you just like scoot your ass back and forth.
Yeah, you sway the bars, and there's something in physics that allows it to have propulsion.
Yeah.
I don't know what it's called.
No
it was a red plastic seat with metal bar and yellow handles, and they were, once you got them going, they were a lot of fun. Yeah,
I don't know what the hell that was called, but it was great.
I remember, so anybody in the New England area who's my age or older was only going to get this joke, but there was in the Lakes region of New Hampshire where I grew up, there was a Surf Coaster, I think is the water park that was there. And I used to love going as a kid. And one of the rides they had was like a cage filled with those things. It has nothing to do with water, so I don't know why it was there. But you had to pry me out of there because I don't care about getting into a wave pool, but I'll drive the hell out of one of those little red seats.
So was it like a bumper cars thing, but with those little?
I mean, it was to me.
Yeah. Oh, you were that asshole? Okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
I was always meant to be behind the wheel, man. It's in my DNA, I guess. Before we end this too, I do want to talk about John Paul Leon as a tribute.
Yeah, absolutely.
Before we wrap this up, but I don't know. Did you do the what you would draw? Oh, you did. That's what got us onto scooters.
What would you, before we get into that, what would you rate this one?
A 4 out of 5.
Yeah, I'm gonna go 5. And I
respect that.
Yeah, I don't know if it's I think it's a 5, like a legitimate 5, but I can't tell if it's a season 4 5, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because Wes and I are doing Enterprise right now, and the 5s that I've given in that, which are few and far between, we constantly have that discussion where it's like, is this a legitimate 5, or is this a 5 for season 3 of Star Trek Enterprise?
Oh, yeah,
You know?
that sounds like a Wes discussion.
Well, it's an appropriate question to ask, because it's like one of the things that, this is way too long, but one of the things that when I was buying a lot of albums in like high school and stuff, I'd go to All Music and check the rating and stuff, and it took me a while to figure out that like a 5-star rating isn't like a universal rating. It's a 5-star rating for that band, if that makes sense. So like, if you're not into Rush, 5 stars on a Rush album doesn't do anything. That means nothing to you. So it's still going to be a shitty album because you don't like Rush. And I feel like that kind of factors into these shows a bit, where it's like season to season, where if you've got a crappy season and you've got one episode that is good, are you going to give it a 5 because it's great for that episode, that season? But if it's in the larger web of the series, is it really only like a 3, or a 3 or a 4?
Right.
But that's just a dumb, heady way of parsing this stuff out, because we've been doing it for like 7 years. But yeah, I'm going to give this one a 5. I think this one holds up. That's a long way of me saying I do think this holds up against the other 5s across the other seasons, I think.
Yeah. So that scooter I was talking about, I think it's called a roller racer, or a turtle scooter.
Yeah, I think roller racer sounds really familiar.
That's certainly more catchy than a... Yeah. Yeah, so they're basically the same thing.
Holy shit,
There's
expensive.
an amusement model. Yeah, they're $130 now.
Jesus.
The roller racer scooter for amusement parks. So I guess Surf Coaster wasn't the only one to have this great idea. Like, hey guys, you know that smooth piece of cement that's a cage? It's just collecting. Why don't we just buy a bunch of these roller racers and kids can just smack the hell out of each other?
We can't afford actual bumper cars, but we can afford these plastic seats with wheels glued to the front of them.
Yeah, like I am curious, like the physics of how the hell this works. I'm sure there's a scientist that can explain, like Bill Nye. That's what we need right now. And for the record, I would love to commission a Bill Nye on one of these things.
Oh boy, yeah.
Yeah, that's funny. Yeah, so John Paul Leon. We've probably mentioned him a handful of times in the podcast because his art is on the radar for people like Clay and myself and a lot of our friends. And any artist that knows what they're doing and has a long interest in studying art and really respecting the artist, so to speak, JP is on that list for sure. I met him twice. Once I had just finished Off-Road and went up to him at a show, and I loved his art. I loved his Challengers of the Unknown and Earth X that he did. And I was just getting to know the world of comics, so I was pretty shy. But I went up to him and chatted, and he was very approachable, super soft-spoken, low-key, nice. He stood up. He was telling me what he liked about my off-road stuff, and I drew a picture of a cop from behind, and he really liked the way I shaded the pants or something like that. But at the time, there really was no overlap between his stuff and mine. But I knew that this guy was doing something that I wanted to mimic. And then years later, I met him with another friend who was crazy about him, and we were in a bar in Manhattan, and I saw JP sitting there and just sitting by himself. So I went up and I embarrassed my friend. My friend loved the way that JP drew gloves, because he drew like really thick work gloves on all of his characters.
Yeah.
He had just a way of drawing the blockiness that it was amazing.
I definitely,
and I loved it too.
I definitely have stolen that, because I love that too. I love the thick fingers where you can like see the seam that runs around the edge of the finger. Yeah. I think that's why when I draw Batman with his loose wristed gloves, they're sort of like classic the spirit gloves, if that makes sense. I still try to do what JP did, and I probably think about JP once a day because of that. And I also have some of his original art here. I have a Challengers page, and I reached out to him last year to see if he was available to do some White Knight stuff, and he declined because he told me that he had cancer. And I didn't know him well enough to be like, oh, do you need anything? Can I, if I knew him really well, I'd say, can I visit? Can I help? Can I this? Can I that? Whatever. But I didn't know him that well. So I was sort of like, what's the correct reaction here other than horror?
And yeah, he I didn't know. Apparently, he was dealing with cancer for like 14 years.
Yeah, that's wild. I didn't know that either.
So one would hope that he had some kind of familiarity and peace with it or something. I don't know. But he was super tight with Tommy Lee Edwards, another really amazing artist who also draws really great thick gloves, by the way.
Yes, he does.
And the two of them, to me, were always like, they seemed like best buds because, yeah. And I guess I sort of saw the JP thing coming, but I was thinking last week, like, man, I got to reach out to JP. I haven't checked in with him about the cancer thing. And I'm like, well, I'm not really close enough to be that friend. And suddenly the news came out that he passed.
Mm-hmm.
So what are your experiences with him?
Yeah, he was one of those artists where I came across him before I really started taking notice or like looking up. Before I really got serious about doing comics, but was still reading them. He was one of those artists that definitely stood out to me as different and really liking the art, but I wasn't in the headspace where I was like tracking down names and stuff at that point. And then later on, when I really did get into the art end of it, I picked him out immediately because he was in a pocket of guys working around the same time that it's not that they had the same style, but they were all kind of circling around the same kind of vibe, and it was really like him and Tommy Lee Edwards and Michael Lark and some of the I can't remember the other guys, but in that kind of vein. Yeah. But he always stood out to me because the way that he could draw a room just broke my brain. Yeah. Like there's these he's any drawing of his that you'll find. Yeah. That's like a pin-up or something. He always draws an amazing background that not only works like graphically, like he'll always block out these big sections of black and the shadows look amazing, but the detail work that he does is amazing. Like he'll draw every windowsill on the windows of the buildings, but it doesn't look over-rendered. Like it's just a perfect distillation of how to represent this stuff and have it all feel of a piece and have it not feel overcrowded and have it all work. And it's a level of understanding of image making that to this day, I probably will never be able to figure it out, but it's something that I will never stop appreciating. And his anytime he's been one of my favorite artists for years and years because of that. His work was just phenomenal.
Yeah, he's a top 10, and I know we say that a lot when an artist passes, but for real this time, he is absolutely hands down a top 10 in the history of comics, one of the best. Yeah. I was when I spoke to him once, he told me, go look at Toth. It all goes back to Toth, is what he said. He was the best of us. He had the perfect style for storytelling. I remember him saying very clearly, go back to Toth. It all goes back to Toth. And I was thinking about that as I listened to him. He was in a podcast about Toth in the past year. If you just Google Toth podcast, John Paul Leon, you'll find it. And I think it's his last interview, podcast, whatever. And, it was under COVID, too. So it's weird hearing someone talk about COVID who's now passed, because I just realized how not so long ago he seemed fine. Right, right. Anyway, he was talking a lot about line weight and about his obsession with finding the right type of line. One line. Like the one specific line that would be the perfect line for Batman's shoulder with this kind of lighting. And he was obsessed with trying to find that line. And he wasn't obsessed with how to render it. He was more involved in like the process leading up to choosing the line. All the work that happens in your head before you actually put pen to paper, I think is what he was more focused on. And he strikes me as a guy who's very hard on himself and never pleased with himself, and that's an earmark of a lot of the greats. But I in a way I wish he was. Yes, Toth had a quicker style that was probably better for storytelling, but JP was more interested in illustration. Like guys like JP feel to me like, oh, you should have been born in 1930 because you would love being an illustrator in the 50s. You could work with gouache and do, fashion illustrations, and then you get lots of money, like Bob Peak or whatever.
Right, yeah.
Like you're just born a man at a time, and you're sort of 40 years too late. And the only way you can find to deploy your style is comics. And I don't think JP really read a lot of comics as far as, characters he was a fan of. I think he's a lot like me in that he sort of kind of liked it as a kid, but he really got interested in the drawing parts, and that's what he was focused on. So when he would do a panel in a comic like Earth X, or I forget some other ones, he drew comics where he had a bunch of action figures in the background. And, he would nail it, but reading those pages, I'm like, man, I know that he doesn't collect this kind of shit. I know Tommy Lee Edward does, but I don't think JP does. So I think he's just doing his impression of what fanboys want to see, and he did it well. But I don't think his heart was into that stuff. I think his heart was into the shadows and the expression, and he was just a man at a time in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and he's one of those guys where I was always disappointed that he wasn't more front and center.
Yeah.
Because he worked on Earth X early in his career, and that stuff is great.
Yeah, in his 20s. He was in his fucking 20s, and like his style was already bulletproof, and like it evolved a little bit, but it's always been great.
Yeah, I saw after
interrupt.
he passed, I saw Walt Simonson put up a post on Facebook, I think, because he actually taught JP at SVA, and JP had gotten a regular drawing gig on like I don't remember what book it was, but it was like a Marvel or DC book when he was a junior in college. Yeah. And so he was doing that stuff full time, and to the point where he had to go to Simonson and be like, can this count as my final project? Because I've been doing 16 pages. I just did 16 pages in 2 weeks or something,
I heard he got started when he was 16.
Yeah, wouldn't surprise me.
I've seen different accounts. His Wikipedia page doesn't seem to be that accurate, but one of the first credits they gave him is RoboCop with John Arcudi back in the early 90s. Mm-hmm. And I thought I heard he was started sooner than that, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, I'm not totally sure, because his style seemed to really coalesce in the Earth X, and I think he worked on. I think he was the first artist on Static X, I think, or Static for Milestone.
Yeah, he was friends with Dennis Cowan, and he was the one that put Toth. He put Toth in Dennis Cowan's hand. Sorry, he put Toth in JP's hands. Toth and Jim Holdaway, who is an artist who is a British strip artist who's really good. Actually, was a fan of his for a while too. He did a book called Modesty Blasé.
Oh yeah, sure.
Which was eventually turned into La Femme Nikita from the 90s.
Oh, okay, yeah. But I feel like in the last 10, 20 years or so, he hasn't been nearly as upfront as I wish he had been. Because I would see him pop up every now and then to do like 2 issues of Batman here and there, and I would grab them if I saw them. But I always, he was always an artist where I was like, man, I wish he was on something front and center that I could go in every month and grab. He did, the last big thing he did was, I think, a book called Batman Creature of the Night, I think Kurt Busiek, Which was
coming out like 6 months ago. It was still coming out, I think.
Right, yeah. And I haven't read the whole thing, but I picked up the first one, and I was flipping, and I was like, I mean, he's unparalleled. He's, like you said, his stuff is bulletproof. Yeah.
Like, I would trade my style with his in a heartbeat. Like, why do people read White Knight, but they have no idea what that book is?
Right.
That's what kills me. And you're right. To be a JP fan over the years, it's hard because he pops up intermittently. The most mainstream thing he ever did was Earth X. I wonder, like, why isn't this guy bigger? Why wasn't he more known? Why, now that he's gone, everyone who's posting, and I'm so glad they are, everyone's like, oh, I haven't heard of this guy. It's like, it's not their fault they hadn't heard of him. Why didn't he get more work? And I don't mean to criticize, of course, but my gut is that JP wasn't really, he was ambitious about the images and his craft. he wasn't ambitious about his career. Like, he wasn't making the kind of moves to try to be number one at all.
Sure.
And you know what? That's totally awesome, because not everyone has to be that way. Like, I am that way, and I know that I'm kind of the weird one in comics. But I look at a guy like JP, and I'm like, man, if I was his manager, I could have made this guy the best. He would have been the best of us. You know, he's one of those guys where it's like, why is he choosing to do this and not that? And you know, when you have cancer for 14 years, I'm sure it sucks the life out of your desire to work every now and then. Of course, you know. But yeah, I always wonder about that too. Is when these guys pass away, guys and girls, and people are like, how come I've never heard of them? It's like, whose fault is it that they weren't bigger in a way, you know?
Well,
and for him, I just imagine it's just his choice more than anything.
Well, I do know he did work outside of comics as well. Like, he did he did a lot of designs for Batman Begins.
He flew to the set too for those.
Oh, damn,
Tommy.
no kidding, yeah. So yeah, I don't know how much work he was doing outside of comics. I mean, that's the thing too, is like comics is such an insulated world that when people disappear, I think our first inclination is to be like, man, what happened to that guy's career? Like Dan Panosian. He kind of
who's alive.
Yeah, who's very much alive and is a fantastic artist. But I feel like there was a big stretch of time where he wasn't doing comics, and I was like, well, whatever happened to that guy? And you were like, well, he did a lot of advertising and all this other stuff. Like, oh, that's right. There is life outside of comics. There are other jobs that pay better. You know.
Yeah, so Dan, who is a buddy of mine, who hopefully will hear this and he'll get the joke. Dan is going to die in a bar fight somewhere because he's like an MMA brawler and he's a badass. But one day, some bottle is going to end up in his face. He's not going to see it coming, or he's going to kill himself in his 800 horsepower Camaro. And we're going to be like, Dan, his stuff was so great. Mm-hmm. How come no one really knew his name? And we're going to be doing the same kind of, surgery on this past 20 years that we're tempted to do on every creator that passes away.
And I hope,
but
I hope that wasn't insulting what I said, but it's like it's that because it's such an insular community that I think when you're not seeing somebody every month, you tend to think, oh, well, what, they just fell off the face of the earth, when they are very much doing other stuff that is in different arenas, and it's not just comics.
Yeah, the concept art or storyboards. And I think he liked, look at his stuff. It had to take time. Like, there's no way I can compete with JP because I'm trying to put out 8 issues a year while I'm writing them. I can't spend 3 days a page.
Right.
Like what he does. Like, part of me wishes I could, because when I'm dead, when I die in my Datsun, or hopefully in a bar fight or something cool.
When you die in your Datsun from carbon monoxide poisoning because you didn't get it inspected.
When the IRS finally hires assassins to take me out. I don't know if people are going to be like, man, Sean's stuff was really good, but some of his pages kind of sucked. Why can't he be more like JP? Whereas if I spent more time on my shit, maybe I would have a portfolio as stout as JP. But unfortunately, I chose to move faster to make more money to do X, Y, and Z, and it is what it is. Like, I'd love to have art that holds up as being a top 10 illustrator like JP, but I have to go faster than him. I just have,
Right.
The other day I was listening to his podcast and he was talking about the one line. Like, how do I capture this with just one line? And I'm literally inking speed lines. So I'm like, line. It's like, man, he was focused on one line. Here I am having like an orgy of lines that I'm barely even thinking about. Like, I think of myself as sort of like him in some ways, but in that moment I felt like, man, this is maybe I don't even need speed lines. Maybe JP was right. Maybe I should be more blocky or whatever.
Yeah, I think when it comes to that stuff, when it comes to a lot of art, there's kind of 2 kinds of artists. There's the samurais and there's the commandos. And the samurais are the ones who, if they can do it with one swipe, they're going to do it with one swipe, with one line. And then there's the commandos who have 6 guns strapped to them at all times, and grenades and knives and everything to get the job done. They'll get the job done, whatever it takes, but they're not going to, they're willing to expend bullets to do it.
With their rifles perched underneath their biceps
firmly under their biceps, yes.
I had a friend once who, he was more of the samurai. But his analogy, it's funny that we all go to war for this. His analogy was he was more like a sniper. where he sits and waits for 3 days just for the perfect shot to take out a target his way. And he said, I'm more of a shoot from the hip type of guy. I'll go into a bar, start trouble. I know my skills are good enough to kill most of the people with my pistols, but I'm certainly not thinking it through halfway through the event. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And he's not wrong. And he admired that I could just dive in and improv my way out. But his personality didn't allow for that.
Yeah, maybe I should pick like sports or something. There's
a lot of murder happening in this podcast.
There's artists who are golfers and artists who are boxers. You know, the golfer wants to get the ball in the hole with as few strokes as possible. The boxer is willing to just keep punching until you fall down.
But golfing isn't cool. Even people who are golfers, in a sense, don't want to be called golfers. Who wouldn't want to be a samurai instead, Clay?
Pick your analogy. I could go all.
I think you had it the first time, man. I think you had it the first time.
But yeah, he was one of a kind, and he's a huge loss. Absolutely.
Yeah, brutal. And I have his art hanging up in my hallway in my stairs. So every day I walk down the stairs to my studio to draw, and I pass by his stuff. And there's more and more dead names on that wall as time goes by, ironically. So
yeah,
sorry to end. I'm glad I can end on a light note there.
I got to meet him once in North Carolina, and he talked to me for like 20 minutes about pens, and was super super enthusiastic about it the entire time. And I want to know the secret. Show me what pens you're using. Absolutely.
Yeah. Let me guess. He had plaid shirt on. Did not look like a comic book artist at all.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Yeah, that's him.
But yeah, he's a guy where it's like I go back in my mind and I was like, man, I wish I could have bought something from him directly when I was there, just to have that experience. But unfortunately, life is what it is.
When I bought my Challengers page from him for like $70, by the way, why has art gotten so expensive? But I bought it and he's like, oh,
says the guy lighting cigars with $100 bills.
Don't tell the IRS. I already told him, actually. When I bought this page, he gave me a story about it, and I wondered, like, man, this is such a good move. Whenever I sell a page, I try to give the buyer a story that they wouldn't get anywhere else, because it's that connection. And the one I bought, he showed me, like, so he drew an outline of a guy's forehead, and he actually whited out the containment line, if that makes sense. So he had the shadowy brow and the top, the hairline. There was no line. But he realized that was like a big learning moment for him, is when he did that, he accidentally whited it out, but then he realized, no, the line is there, but I can't see it, was his thing.
Yeah. And
he tried to take that lesson forward. And yeah, I think about that every time I look at the page, honestly.
Yeah. Well, it's a good place to go out on.
Yeah, I mean, it's a funny, one last thing. When he goes on about Toth versus himself, to me, that's like a very interesting line that's being drawn. Is Toth wouldn't have drawn these amazing illustrations of Batman in a city with all those windows. Toth would have found a way to quickly render it so it's digestible,
right.
looks good enough, and then you move on, which you could argue that's what better storytelling is. But I would say, I know JP wanted to be more like Toth, but man, it looks so good when you render those windows.
Right.
Like, I don't care if I'm supposed to be reading the next page and I'm stuck on this page that has beautiful windows in the background behind Batman. Like, that's what's going to make you stand out. Like, yes, this is more of an illustration. Yes, it is slowing me down. It's upsetting the pace of the book. But, I mean, how do you expect your pages to function? Is it supposed to just serve the story, even if it's boring? Or do you want enough, like, glosh and zhuzh and awesomeness in there to bring readers back? Because sometimes art can be so broken down and digestible, when you go look at it again, there's nothing more to learn from it.
Right.
Whereas if you go back to JP, there's always new things to learn. So I think there is something about embracing the complexity of art, which Toth didn't really do a lot, which was a choice. I get that. But to me, that's the interesting thing between Toth and JP. And if he was alive, I think I would tell JP, dude, don't worry about it. You're doing things that Toth can't do. Like, you're able to do things that Toth was not able to do, period. And if Toth was alive, he would tell you to go fuck yourself, because that's the kind of guy Toth was, from what I understand.
Yeah, I think it comes down to, you have that dragon you're chasing, as far as inspiration or influence. But along the way, what you end up doing is creating a way to synthesize that into your own thing, which is what he absolutely, because you look at his stuff, you can see the Toth in there, but he's not beholden to it. You know, he's not trying to copy Toth.
And I can see why you love it, because you approach comics as a painter, which is, I think, is what JP is. Because even when he talks about line, he's not talking about it in the same way that like the inker Scott Williams talks about lines. You know?
Right. Yeah.
Like he's looking for a line that takes the place of brushstrokes in a way, and you can kind of feel that from his stuff.
Yeah. But yeah, go out, buy some John Paul Leon comics, and have your mind blown.
Yep. I remember there was a winter something he did. It was
Winter Men?
Wildstorm. Yes, Winter Men. Really great pictures of like Russian architecture, and it was sort of a crime noir story. Gorgeous. I forget who wrote it. I apologize. But yeah, that would be my favorite JP stuff. Yeah.
There was, I picked up 2 issues of Detective Comics he did a couple years ago. That was it was a Clayface story that involved like a plane full of people who had been poisoned or something, and it was again, it was one of those things where it's like I hadn't seen his work like up on the shelves in a while, and I grabbed it, and it was just like, man, yeah, he's fantastic. Why isn't he the regular artist on Detective Comics? But
yeah.
But yeah, whatever you can find. Earth X is great. Anything he does with Batman is fantastic. Anything with his name.
He did a Batman Black and White story too.
Right, yeah. Anything with his name on it is worth a buy. So,
yep. Check out Tommy Lee Edwards too, of course. And if you see that, the Toth podcast is really interesting. If you're an artist and you want to deep dive into what a line means, then it's interesting. And also hearing an artist as talented as JP talking about how insecure he is, but in a way that he's managing it. Like he doesn't sound like a wreck. He's aware of where he wants to go.
Right.
That makes sense,
And strangely enough, the Alex Toth podcast, just as much hentai talk is on this show. So
who'd have thought?
But I think that's going to do it for us for today. Thanks for sticking with us for a longer episode. We're going to be back next time with Love is a Crock and Torch Song. So thanks, guys. Thank you, Sean.
Thanks, man. Next time.
We'll talk to you soon. Bye.